Welcome to Movie Heaven, Movie Hell with me, Simon Aitken, and
I'm Keith Eyles, and we are both independent filmmakers who enjoy discussing movies and related media. And for this special series of episodes celebrating 40 years of Star Wars, we're happy to be joined by two of our regular filmmaker podcast friends. We have on the line Alex Brunning and Clive Ashenden.
Hello.
Welcome, guys.
Happy Life Day, everyone.
Oh dear. Yes, indeed. So we've had a few podcasts where we've looked at the prequel trilogy, the original trilogy, the new saga films, and for this one, we are going to look at some of the standalone films within the Star Wars franchise over the years. So we're going to be looking at things like the Ewok movies, the Clone Wars, and Rogue One. But we're also going to talk about the first one is the... I almost can't bring myself to say it. What are we going to talk about?
we're going to talk about the Star Wars Holiday Special.
Yay! Did this come out? This came out the same year as New Hope, right?
No, it's coming at 78.
78. Okay, fair enough.
So the year after. So, little history about it. When I was a collector back in the late 90s, this is one of those videos that you would get under the counter. You know, what with it's true. It's kind of like somebody who had a copy and they would pass it to you on a VHS because George Lucas allowed a TV network to do this holiday special, thinking, what's the harm in doing it? And then he saw it, and from that point on, he wanted every copy of it in existence to be destroyed, and with good reason. But amongst the collectors, it was a sought after item because it was forbidden fruit. It just made it that more appealing.
You make it sound like Star Wars porn.
Well, there's that weird bit where one of the Wookiees has a hologram headset with a dancer in it who's seems to be trying to turn him on or something. It's it's a bit close to porn.
Wookiee porn. I mean, that's Dinah Carroll. Come on, she's tells him that she finds him adorable. So. And I think we shouldn't judge, interspecies relationships. It's a big galaxy, and we should be broad-minded about these things.
We should be inclusive of all of it, indeed. But it is fair to say though that if George didn't like this definitely wasn't considered canon then, right?
Well, you say that, but they subsequently released the animation, which formed part of the holiday special, as a Blu-ray extra. So, there's at least part of it that is kind of, had an official release subsequently. So, I guess you could point to that, first appearance of Boba Fett if you wanted to, as being something that's, not being completely disowned, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing that I think most of us collectors were interested in, because it was the introduction of Boba Fett in the Star Wars universe, and we just wanted to see what that was like. Tell the truth, we never really talked about the rest of it, and and having now seen it for good reason.
I think the problem with it is there wasn't much to the rest of it.
Yeah,
I always thought that was the issue with it. Nothing really happened apart from all the basic actors looking incredibly uncomfortable and embarrassed. I mean, it was bizarre.
Yes.
bizarre watching. Like watching a car crash.
A bizarre variety show.
Yeah.
Yes, that they were obviously contracted to do, but didn't necessarily. I mean, bloody hell, it's got Harrison Ford in it. I mean,
and Harrison Ford makes it obvious when he doesn't want to be in something, doesn't he?
yeah. Well, yes, we know he doesn't hold back if he doesn't approve, and yeah. I mean, yeah, you're right though, Clive. The Boba Fett thing, I suppose, is the significant bit. I mean, this is one of 3 characters that have been introduced into the Star Wars universe via animation. Because obviously, first it was Boba Fett in this. Then we had General Grievous in the Clone Wars, the original animated series that came before the movie. And then, of course, we had Saw Gerrera, who was introduced in the Clone Wars TV series. So, yeah, 3 times we've had characters that come in following movies that were introduced in animated shows first. So,
Yeah, but B. Arthur didn't appear in Empire Strikes Back, sadly. So,
Well, she had a barter run.
that's true.
yes.
Oh dear. I mean, it's watching it and just remembering what programming used to be like back in the 70s. It kind of works the rules of a holiday special. You have a lot of guests in it, and they do little bits in it. But this bizarre idea of hanging it around a Wookiee family, and they all talk Wookiee. There's no subtitles or anything, so you have no idea what on earth they're going on about.
I always had that thing of you watch it and you expect Val Doonican to sort of turn up, his little rocking chair and start singing with sort of guest stars. It was a very, 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 very sort of structured format for it. It's family Christmas, but you look at the hype from the year before when Star Wars was released. There was so much interest, and there was such a delay on getting Empire that anything that was coming out, anything that was available, people would lap up. I mean, I've never seen the actual figures of the viewing figures for it, but I bet they were bloody high.
Oh yeah. Oh.
I mean, people probably suffered through 3 hours of hours. It's amazing TV. It must have been absolutely amazing.
Yeah, well, you get a musical number by Jefferson Starship, right? So there's a wide range of entertainment within this dribble, isn't there?
Yeah. Well, I think that sort of Alex, what you're saying about oh god, what's his name?
Val Doonican.
Yeah. The Val Doonican of this is Carrie Fisher singing the Life song.
Isn't that amazing? That's a treat in and of itself.
Yes.
And Mark Hamill with lots of eye makeup, if memory serves.
Well, this was after he had his car crash, so
right.
That's why he looks really plastic.
Yeah, it was right.
He hadn't been hit by a wampa yet. Yeah. Yes. So,
Though I cannot explain the hair in it. His hair is so weird. It must have been a wig or something. But it looks. He does. He looks like his plastic figure.
Wasn't it a wig? Because he had because of the actual scarring to one side of his face, he had actually had his head shaved on one side.
It's probably a wig.
It's probably. Yeah.
Oh well, there you go. Wigs and
that's a good spot, Simon. Thinking about that now, it's probably a wig.
Well, obviously he didn't have time to go and dye his hair like he does in Last Jedi.
So I mean, guys, I think we need to kind of delve into the holiday special in terms of what it tells us about Chewbacca and his life.
Okay.
So we find out Chewbacca is married. He has a wife called Mara, a dad called Itchy, and a son called Lumpy.
Lumpy. That's
Lumpy is the name of his son. Yeah.
Yes. And Lumpy is very annoying.
Yeah, Lumpy is very annoying. And also Chewbacca, not really a stay-at-home dad, is he? But it's okay because he turns up for one day every year without fail. So that's awesome.
Chewie's a deadbeat dad.
Who knew?
Is Chewie? Is that dated yet? So how long has he been married, and why are the kids so young? You know, it's an oddity that.
You know? 200-year-old Wookiee with a Well, yes. I mean,
Lucas timeline. You know.
Yeah.
I guess he was just waiting for the right one.
Planet, don't they? Kashyyyk or whatever. Is that the first time we hear that in this holiday special?
Yeah.
Okay, so
although everyone, it gets pronounced in a really strange way, doesn't it? I think they call it Kashyyyk.
It's what, Clive? I haven't watched it in a couple of years, so I'm dredging up memories of it, which aren't very happy.
It's fresh in my mind because I've just re-experienced it. So this time I watched the Riff Tracks version, which I have to recommend if you decide to watch all of it, because there's plenty of opportunity to just watch the cartoon on its own. If you want to do that, you can do that. But the Riff Tracks version does sort of make it fun, So if you're not going to sort of stimulate yourself with some sort of chemicals, then I'd say watch that version.
It's the only bit of the homework that I didn't do. I must admit, I didn't revisit the holiday special, so I probably haven't seen it. Last time I probably saw it was when I was in film school, so that would have been late 90s or whatever, when myself and James and Rod and whatever, we sat and watched it and couldn't believe it. We were like, what the hell is this?
It's one of those odd things about it, though. It's the whole staging of it was amateurish as well. This film that come out and changed everybody's view of sci-fi and sci-fi adventure, and it was really poorly done. I mean, the sets were not great. It wasn't exactly, we've spent a lot of money on this, guys. It was, almost Crossroads that, if they banged the door to the wooden hut too hard, the roof would come in. It was.
Wow. So far we've had mentioned in this podcast Val Doonican and Crossroads. My God. It is like a 70s podcast or something.
I was 11 years old when this came out. So I'm thinking back to it and I'm going, it was shown in the UK.
Wow.
Late night. I presume it would be ITV, but at the time. But I have no memory of it at the time. It was not something that was advertised, not something that was pushed and things like that. So, I mean, Lucas got his way. It didn't spread around the world, did it?
No. Well, I think it instilled in him the need to sort of control everything about Star Wars, because I think he was very hands-off on this. He was like, somebody came up to him from a network and said, we would love to do this, and he was like, okay. And
he did write the outline though, didn't he? He gave them an outline where he sort of, because that's why they celebrate. If they were just left to their own devices, then they'd be celebrating Christmas, even though it's just supposedly takes place a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Yes.
But yeah, so and it was his idea to have it on the planet of the Wookiees.
Right.
See, I think that angle is where you have to look at it, because you remember he's disassociated himself with funding for his next project, and he's looking for money. He's selling as many toys as he possibly can, and he's pulling in money here and money there from, small little people that he knew around the business. But he was looking for capital for his next movie because it was his. He was owning it. So how much did the network pay him for this? He gave him 3 hours of network time for his
2 hours. It just feels like 3 hours, Alex.
Oh, it does feel like 3 hours. Sorry. But do you know what I mean?
It probably took place over like 4 hour slot one evening or something, with the amount of commercials that they ram in amongst it. Yeah. So
first time I watched it, it still had the commercial breaks in the recording. It was brilliant. The commercials were more fun.
You can still watch it with those commercials from Baltimore, which is great. All the GM motors and the
Alka-Seltzer adverts in there. Do you know that? The plop plop fizz fizz. I love that advert. It made the show.
There's one for a toy called Tobor, which Tobor is robot spelt backwards, kids. There you go. See what they did there? That's good.
Wow.
It was a daring idea, because remember, we live in a world now where film and TV crossovers are so common. We don't distinguish between the two, a lot of the time. And you think, here's someone in 1978 going, "What? I'm going to cross over movie with TV," when there wasn't any connection, apart from the only one that had the connection was Battlestar Galactica. That was the only other thing that had a connection. That was the TV company pushing their TV show into cinemas to hopefully build their TV viewing audience.
Well, I mean, Buck Rogers did that as well. I remember Buck Rogers was released here as a film, and the Ewok films that we're going to talk about, well, over in the States they were TV movies, but yet they got theatrical releases over here.
It's because TVs wouldn't touch them. Bizarre, I don't know. I even though it was an absolute travesty, this TV outing for the Ewoks with the rest of the cast from Star Wars sort of thrown in as an aside, was probably a marketing genius at the time. It's, even though he regretted it the minute it was actually aired, it just sort of kept it going. If you look at the how Empire 2 years later exploded across the world, and the US, I think the opening weekend was almost double what Star Wars was. I mean, it's you sort of think, even though we regretted because it wasn't that good, it was a marketing coup, because it probably gave him quite a bit of money from the network to help him fund the film, and more publicity. Not that Star Wars actually needed more publicity, but it was quite well received, bizarrely, at the time.
Well, there you go. But I take it, I'm assuming, obviously, with the Disney acquisition of it all, that this has definitely moved to the realms of legends now, right?
Yes.
I fucking hope so.
If they do another one, don't count Disney out. They like their holiday specials.
Come to Planet Mickey. Yeah.
Oh, could be frightening. Depends.
All right. Anything else anyone wants to add about the holiday special? Actually, I think we've given it plenty of time.
Well, I want to say a couple of semi-positive things about it before we move on.
Okay. Oh, go on.
It is. I mean, I'm struggling here because it is pretty poor,
Well, you're the guy, Clive. You're the guy that called Star Trek V shit. So I want to know how you're going to justify anything good about this one, Clive.
Well, okay. I mean, bear in mind, and this is like, it's like 2 hours, so it's mean scraps here. But what you do get to see is something you don't get to see in any of the main movies, which is the Empire, what it's like to be under the heel of the Empire for like the everyday people around the galaxy. So we get to see the Empire doing big things like blowing up planets and, you know, sort of chasing down the rebellion. But in this one, you actually get them to see them going, you know, sort of imposing curfews on planets and just going into people's houses, busting stuff up. They, you know, hey, a stormtrooper rips Lumpy's toy bantha in two. You know, it's. I mean, that's. If that's not fascism, you know, it like incarnate. I don't know what is. So you get to see that, and also you get to. There are a couple of sort of touching moments. You know, Han and Chewie have a big hug at the end when Han leaves. You know? and it's like, oh, that's nice. You know.
Yes, and Harrison Ford looks like he's enjoying every second of that. Oh,
doesn't he say "I love you too, buddy" or something? Is that not a line, if memory serves? Does he not say?
You know, it's you know, it's special. It's a special lifetime miracle. You know, and I don't care what you say. I like Carrie Fisher singing at the end. So there we go.
You just Carrie Fisher, it's like, especially then. I mean, when they did the special, she was slimming down for the next role. Again.
She had buns in this one, right? Like in New Hope.
Yes,
because it was the same. It was all the same costumes and stuff, wasn't it? Remember,
But
Luke doesn't get his awards room gear, does he? He's back in his farm boy gear. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't make any sense, but there you go.
That's what he relaxes in. You know, that's what they're trying to say.
Right.
The other thing about it, you think about how things progress. I mean, Wachowski brothers and you know, then used the idea of, you know, a cartoon interlude to connect and introduce new characters. You know,
from
the Matrix. Yeah. You know, so it's sort of interesting that, you know, 20 odd years after, you know, he had done it in a, you know, a regrettable holiday special, it's repeated again. You know, and you know, and even though, you know, the second and third Matrix films were, you know, they were made even worse to the point that said, if you haven't watched the cartoon, you can't understand it at all.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the Matrix was very much based on anime, and they wanted to pay that back, and they wanted to work with quite a few famous animators. So I think that's where that came from. And
it's interesting that they followed that path, you know. That was introduced there. It's the same with Planet of the Apes and the cartoon season that they pushed through.
Don't knock the cartoon season of Planet of the Apes. My God, that's a whole nother podcast. I'm not even going to go there.
Yeah, but between film and TV series, it's.
I mean, one thing I did notice watching the cartoon in this is that it's weird. It's like because of the way they're drawn, Luke and Leia look very similar, almost like they could be brother and sister.
Really?
So I know.
Wow.
So I wonder if that's where if George got the idea from that. You know?
I think that's really interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
I must admit, when anybody sort of says, "Oh, George Lucas had a plan for the whole trilogy," you just go, "Well, why was Luke so interested in Leia in the first one?"
You know, he has an odd idea about
oh dear.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we're coming up to his, you know, his sort of little peccadilloes and obsession next, aren't we? Which is the Ewoks.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I mean, talking about the Ewoks, wasn't originally the idea that Return of the Jedi was going to feature the planet of the Wookiees?
Yes,
that's correct.
Yes.
So did the kind of the sort of, you know, how much he hated the TV special, like, contribute to the birth of the Ewoks? Then, do you think, you know, as to why he didn't end up going down that road?
Possibly. I mean, I've got to say, with Return of the Jedi, it was very more about a metaphor about, like, the little guy beating the big guys. And I think he went literal with it, with having little teddy bears instead of. I mean, Yeah.
But I think it's a fetish he has.
Yeah, I mean, what Lucas has actually said about this was in his original screenplay for, what was then Revenge of the Jedi or whatever. It was a group of Wookiees that would overthrow the Empire. But he said because we'd seen Chewbacca, and Chewbacca had been quite a sophisticated character, flying spaceships and dealing with technology. And again, like you said, Simon, that sort of metaphor about the primitive and the little people overthrowing the Empire. That's when he decided to go complete opposite. So he said, so rather than the height, he went for shortness. Rather than long, shaggy fur, he went for short fur. And then, rather than like laser crossbows and stuff, he went with the whole, flint sticks and catapults and spears and all that sort of stuff. So that's where it kind of came from. But one of my, if you like, bugbears with Return of the Jedi has always been the fact that much as I like the metaphor of it all, I always found it, even as a kid, I always found it a little unbelievable that the Ewoks could overthrow the Imperials with all their technology and weaponry so easily.
Keith, that wasn't. Do you know the thing with the Ewoks when they were introduced in Jedi? One of the big problems I had was I think back to Michael Palin when they did Jabberwocky, and he talked about how do you make somebody in a costume look not human, look not like somebody in a costume, and basically the Python idea with that was they literally had the guy walking backwards, so he looked bizarre. And they structured it. But the point is that somebody in a suit looks like somebody in a suit. And the thing that made the Wookiees work, and Chewie specifically, was that he was fucking tall. He was very, very tall, So he changed the perception. He was outside of things. The problem with Ewoks in Jedi is they looked like children and small people in costumes. They just didn't function. They really didn't function. You just try and look at eyes when you actually watch the film. None of the eyes work. They're just bits of plastic.
He's tried to fix that in the special edition, and suddenly with some blinking. But
that doesn't work either. Because it's not functional. The whole premise of the Ewoks was flawed. It was never going to work.
Can I just add as well, the cynic in me says that Ewok toys would be more sellable than Wookiee toys.
Yeah, true. Probably cheaper as well.
They're smaller.
Okay, at this point, I feel like I have to defend the Ewoks. I'm stepping forward into the Ewok corner, okay, and I'm mounting. This is the spirited defence of the Ewok peoples.
Okay.
Okay. Right. When I watched Return of the Jedi at the cinema when it came out, and I had no problem at all with the Ewoks. I feel like it's so easy to come at this for a kind of adult point of view, and the Ewoks aren't meant for adults at all. But then, I can see why you look at them and kind of poke holes and stuff. But I will say that there is a long history in like real human history of like small guerrilla forces, taking down much like bigger and better armed armies that come into their territory because they know their territory and they have weapons and tactics that work there. So I mean, you could view that it's like a big metaphor for Vietnam if you want to.
Clive, I completely agree with you. I watched Return of Jedi in the States. When it came out, and it was a great film. It was fabulous. And as you said, the idea of the Ewoks is great. It's the idea of them that's great, not the actual realization of them. And I think that's always been the problem when he introduced or Lucas introduced them, is if we'd had CGI then where we could create them and make them feel real, and if he had done a little bit more research, into, our simple native cultures and things like that about how they interact and how they behave, it would have been great. But they were basically soft and cuddly and didn't look very real, and that made it, if they behaved the way they behaved in Return of the Jedi going forward, they would all be dead in a couple of weeks. They couldn't survive in this, this environment they lived in. When you watch the Ewok movies and the creatures that are out in the woods and the forests with them, they'll be dead within a week. So for me, that was the problem, is the believability of the actual Ewoks themselves would have been fine if they'd had the technology to actually make them feel real, and the actual anthropological, sort of research to make their culture feel real. But it didn't.
But you see, Alex, all this talk has been about Return of the Jedi so far. We haven't yet gone into the incredibly in-depth world building and sort of and broadening of the Ewok cultures that we get in Ewoks Caravan of Courage and Ewoks the Battle for Endor, right?
It's very true. It's like Caravan of Courage is just so much, an anthropological, survey into the Ewok culture and Ewok history that, yes, perhaps we should discuss that further.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'd say when I was a child, I saw both these films on video, and I can kind of remember my reaction to Caravan of Courage. It was, for me as a kid, my parents were everything. So the idea of these kids' parents being kidnapped, taken away, and them having to, try and rescue them, I thought, I found was, really sad, but, really made for a good adventure. But having gone back and watched it, it's not very good. I would say it's definitely a film that's aimed at children. The production values in it probably not. They're not that high. It's that weird thing where it's a TV movie. It kind of looks like a TV movie, and it doesn't quite have the quality of a film. But as a kid, these were films, and but saying that, I think I enjoyed Battle for Endor a lot more than I enjoyed Caravan of Courage.
Yeah, Battle for Endor was sort of a micro version of Return of the Jedi, wasn't it? Let's go into the forest and battle our way back. It sort of felt that way.
Yeah. But I mean, what a way to start a film. I mean, I know we're going to jump around a bit, but yeah. I have to. I mean, the thing is, so Caravan of Courage, they went through all this effort to rescue the parents. And then the beginning of Battle of Endor, not only did they kill the parents off, but they killed the boy off as well.
Mace, yes.
And they like the name Mace in the Star Wars universe,
yes.
don't they?
Yes,
Mace
Windu.
And they changed the actor for the dad. Between films. It was like,
yes, you got the headmaster from from The Breakfast Club.
Paul
Gleason.
Yes.
Yeah.
You'll get the horns, boy.
But having said that, the mother deserved to get killed off, because I have to say the actress that played the mother in Caravan of Courage was appalling. That was appalling.
You say that, but she's the only one who's ever gone on to anything else out of all those actors. Yes.
No nepotism there then. Yeah. But
you see, I hadn't seen these films until this week.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I was always aware of them through things like, Starburst and Starlog magazine and stuff like that. But where I lived down in the south of England, it never got these didn't get theatrical releases down. I guess they may have done in certain cities, but it didn't down where I lived. And for some reason, the local video stores didn't stock these either. So I never really saw them. But because I wasn't, for me, my Star Wars fandom was all, I could never make up my mind whether it was New Hope or Empire Strikes Back, which was the better film, and I was never really into, even as a kid, particularly into the Ewoks, but so I never really felt I was missing out by not seeing these films, but had always been aware of them. So, I got to experience this for the first time literally, a week ago. And I have to agree with you, or like you've said, I think that the Battle for Endor was actually a more enjoyable film than the Caravan of Courage Ewok film. But
Caravan of Courage was difficult because it seemed to me that they'd cast Shirley Temple in the sort of lead role as a little girl, and I expected to sort of burst into, the good ship Lollipop, and she was one of the most annoying child actresses ever. Just such an annoying kid.
I must admit, I thought the boy was more annoying.
Yeah, but they killed the boy off in the second film, and they didn't kill her off. What's that about?
He actually did get a bit of screen time at the beginning of the second one, but literally like a scene or so, wasn't it? And then he was killed. I was surprised they went there. Actually, that was quite dark for a kiddies TV movie.
But Battle for Endor was the darker of the two films. I mean, you had that like nightmare sequence when she was in the hut by herself, and she runs over to the bed, and it's the lead guy in it. You had that kind of, it was that kind of dark fairy tale to it.
We definitely remember the first film, Caravan of Courage, is basically Jack and the Beanstalk.
With a bit of the Hobbit thrown in when they're caught in that spider web thing.
It's basically, instead of getting the harp, they're trying to get the the transmitter as part, and the family, the parents and the other people who are taken, but it's the transmitter that they need to get. Instead, it's the harp. And the golden goose in Jack and Beanstalk. It's sort of an interesting idea that. It's like I think Lucas always wanted to try and tell fairy tales, and I think this was a bit more, because if you look at the Ewoks, the transition from the Ewoks was he then went to Willow, which was luckily for him, an up and coming director,
directed by Ron Howard,
created something that was fabulous. That managed to marry all that up, the little Elwins and things, and I think he was progressing to that anyway, and I think he was trying to tell those stories in the Ewok movies, especially Caravan of Courage.
I think both the Ewok movies seem to me to be aimed at slightly different age groups. I feel like Caravan of Courage feels like it's almost aimed at preschoolers. It's like the pacing is much slower. It's sort of reminding me of something like Teletubbies, where it's like everything is kind of stated for you. That they rather than doing what the holiday special did, where you have characters just grunting in it at each other and you have no idea what they're saying. And this you have Burl Ives as special guest narrator, and so it has this almost like. It reminded me of like one of those sort of Disney movies they used to put as like a B feature with their re-released animated films.
That's
in the in the early 80s, where it was like Incredible Journey, or and here we where they just be narrating the lives of animals, and it was like that, and here we have the Ewok family and engaging in their normal hunter-gatherer routine. It's almost anthropomorphical. Anthropological, sorry, but I mean, then you come to sort of some slightly weird choices, which I was like, oh, okay, like they Ewoks riding horses, so that there are so in this world there are some sort of earth fauna, but there's also things like giants and kind of stop motion creatures and puppets. And so it was interesting because Yeah,
wasn't there a skunk or something running around at one point? Or
chickens,
did I imagine that?
it's but it's weird because it sort of it made me think, the world building in Return of the Jedi wasn't all that fleshed out. It's interesting because it's like in all the Star Wars movies, they're sort of it's kind of almost like a trope in that each planet has almost like one ecosystem, right? You have the desert planet, you have this, you have the sort of snowscape planet, the ice planet, and with the moon of Endor, you have the forest moon. But if you compare it to something, whenever, even if you walk into like a wood, or not even going to like a rainforest or something like that, these forests are teeming with life. But the only sort of indigenous life we really see in Return of the Jedi are the Ewoks. And if you compare it to something like Avatar, where the forest is filled with all this whole ecosystem of different interlocking creatures, it's like, I mean, I don't, it doesn't bother me, but it sort of almost made me think retrospectively back, thinking, it does seem weird how there's almost like, that they've treated Endor like it's, in a similar way to Hoth or Tatooine, where you got little kind of spots of creatures, but you don't get this whole kind of cornucopia of people. But then at the same time, I understand story reasons. You're focused on getting to the shield generator and then the battle of Endor. So. But I thought,
but it's kind of funny that Lucas then when it came to the prequels went the opposite direction and just filled the screen full of shit. full of just full of stuff with different creatures and different things and just
but no background, no structure, no where do they come from, what's their environment. I think Clive's right. I understand that the Ewok movies were originally TV movies, so they didn't have the budget, and Avatar had one of the biggest budgets of all time, and most of that was on the animators going, "Oh, what should we create now?" So you can see that they can create an ecosystem. But you think at the time it wasn't relevant. If you look at everything that Lucas has done, in the Star Wars environment, he's never explored where people have come from, structures. Perhaps that's why the holiday special upset him so much, because oh my God, they're giving some background to how the Wookiees live. Who knows?
Well, I mean, now with the latest film, they're even dealing with class systems and whatever. Within that universe, you've got like the ridiculously wealthy and slave kids and all sorts of stuff going on. But you're right. In Return of the Jedi, Endor did seem very small, but you're right. It's just because, it was to serve that sort of part of the story. Whereas obviously in these films, he did try and sort of flesh the culture out a lot more. But what I was always slightly confused as with these, they're obviously made the year after Return of the Jedi, and I think there was only a year between the two productions. Yeah, but this was, I'm guessing, supposed to be set before the events of Return of the Jedi, right?
That's correct.
Was
yes.
supposed to have happened. Yeah, which the first one, obviously, we had Mr. Narrator, which was fine, but by the second one, we had Wicket speaking English, or basic as they call it in the Star Wars universe, which I guess he learned from the little girl, right? Which you can kind of buy that, but obviously, by the time he meets Princess Leia in Return of the Jedi, he's forgotten all of that again because, and I know why they did it in terms of a production thing. It's aimed at a kid, so they're not going to be reading subtitles. They just want it easy and accessible for children and stuff. But it did make me kind of think, is this supposed to take place when exactly is this in the sort of timeline of it all? It's one of those things. I think in terms of their, I know they're not considered canon, but in terms of expanding on the Ewoks and giving them a bit of backstory, as far as I'm concerned, they're harmless enough from that point of view. I mean, we've got a couple of the Ewok characters from obviously Wicket being the main one, but a couple of the others from Return of the Jedi in there. But obviously we've got a whole load of new characters, and I did think in the second one that sort of speedy, like weird puppet thing, that he would have been quite handy against the Empire. He could have got into the shield generator and out before anybody knew it. And stuff like that. See, I did sort of think, what happened to him? He should have gone off on the ship with the girl and the old man.
Yeah, that was a creepy thing.
Teak, yes.
Yeah.
Teak. There you go.
Yes,
yeah.
Teak. I mean, I have to say one of the other odd things about these films is, magic. In Caravan of Courage, Logray, the kind of shaman of the Ewok tribe, who we met in Return of the Jedi, is he a force user or is he just a magician? Because he gives everyone going on in the caravan a kind of like magical gifts. He turns it basically in this. He's like Gandalf, and I think in that one I can just about go, okay, so he's kind of like a latent force user. I can see that. Yeah. I mean, by the time we get to Battle for Endor, it's like proper, wizards and witches and kind of, then it feels not really in universe. I mean, it does feel like very much in between film between Willow and and Return of the Jedi. It does feel like that stepping stone because you've got there's an evil witch who shapeshifts in it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean that's not a Sith power I'm familiar with, but perhaps I'm wrong.
Yeah, and the bad guys looked a bit Star Trek-y to me. They had a little bit of like the Kazon about them or something. It did all kind of, like you said, it didn't feel particularly Star Warsy. It felt like it was sort of from another universe a little bit, but
I think it's because if you look at the Battle for Endor, Lucas has stepped away even further. The amount of production stuff that he gets involved with seems to be a lot less and a lot. His writing is. He's literally, it's taken from a story of his, so probably nothing to do with what he wrote in respect to it in that. So it's perhaps, but then again, it definitely seemed to be a progression from, the first Ewok movie, the second Ewok movie to 3 years later in '88 or whatever, Willow, where you are lots of little people are, in a completely magical world, I don't know. It's the Battle for Endor was, it was dark, but it was terrible storyline that you just sort of, I don't know, the problem with the Ewok movies is that there's nothing to them. There's not great stories, they're sort of mimicking, bits and pieces of fairy tales and bits and pieces of, other films, and there's nothing special about them. There's nothing to entice you into the story, let alone, poor choices of actors and not very good teleplays.
Well, can I just say, though, I would say that the casting of Wilford Brimley in Battle of Endor was inspired. Because I have to say, I never knew that I wanted to see Wilford Brimley do a sword fight before seeing this, and now I don't want to see anything else. I just want to see Wilford Brimley doing sword fights because he was the thing that elevated. Thank you. Elevated the story. I mean, when he comes on screen, it sort of raises it up a bit, and at the end of the day, these films were definitely made for children. They're not for a general audience. It's the kind of film that you put on for the kids, and they'll sit there and they'll watch it, and at the end of it, it'll keep them quiet for a bit, and then once it's over, they want to watch something else, and that's fine. But it doesn't kind of have the same longevity that the rest of the Star Wars films have.
Yeah, I mean, it's that kiddified Star Wars feel, and yeah, I mean, yeah, it's interesting that he wanted to do this actually, and take the Ewoks, and because he did write both of these films, I believe, didn't he? He wrote the story outlines at least. Story, yeah, and a lot of his Lucasfilm team were involved. I mean, I know Phil Tippett did some of the stop go animation in these films, because obviously it's back at the old school of having to do the effects that way, and some of them work, some of them not so much, but
God, yeah, some of the matting, especially with the giant in Caravan of Courage, it's just appalling. It's yeah, you can tell there is a TV movie, because there wasn't any finishing, there wasn't any secondary passes. It just was this is what was created, this is what it's going to look like, and it looked like characters standing in front of a projected screen.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate.
But I mean, Clive, you and I have had discussions, prior to me even seeing the Ewok movies, about the Ewok movies, and I know you've got kind of a sort of special nostalgic place for these. I mean, to you, are these canon, or does it just not matter? What do you think?
I think people get very hung up on what's canon. I think I saw Caravan of Courage at the cinema. I mean, prior to rewatching it for this, I can't say I had like a really strong memory of it. I remembered the blonde moppet-haired little girl. I remembered Wicket was in it. I remembered it being sort of fun. I don't know that I'd ever seen Battle for Endor. Strangely, I don't remember that coming to my local cinema, but perhaps it did.
I get the feeling it went straight to video, to the truth.
Yeah. I think I was maybe that little bit too old when that one did come around finally on video. So this is the first time for me seeing it. I mean, the thing I kind of react against is this idea of kind of almost like Star Wars purity. These, especially for me, I think Caravan of Courage was a theatrical movie. I know it was made for TV. So the idea that you can kind of put it in a box and pretend that it was never made, I don't really agree with that. And I like the idea that there's different Star Wars for different people, especially for different times in your life. I mean, I'm not going to get the same thing out of it now than I did when I was, a very young kid watching Caravan of Courage. But then that's fine, And obviously I'm watching it now with a slight veil of nostalgia, probably. But and I recognise neither of these are particularly strong films, but they're not awful either. I find it very difficult to dislike them, even though there are spots where there's some very poor acting, there's some effects that aren't very successful. But I mean, I kind of enjoyed them on the rewatch,
No, I'll give you that.
I think my point is that don't just sort of damn them, out of hand. And okay, if you don't like Ewoks, this is not going to be for you, is it? But I think if I was going to try and introduce like young kids to Star Wars, then Caravan of Courage as my first Star Wars film sort of primer isn't that bad a thing. I think, assuming that the young child isn't so sophisticated and already watching sort of CG fests already. But in terms of the storytelling, it's quite sweet.
Yeah.
So
I would say that's reasonable. I mean, for someone who hadn't seen these films and going to watch them recently, I went into it with a lot of cynicism about it because I'm not the biggest Ewok fan in the world, and I sort of thought, oh God, and these had a reputation of being quite bad films. But on watching them, to be perfectly honest, they're harmless enough. Some of the acting's a bit dodgy and some of the story points aren't that great, but at the same time, in terms of a piece of entertainment, I agree with everything you're saying. If I had a 6-year-old nephew or something, and I was going to introduce them to Star Wars, this absolutely isn't a bad road into it whatsoever. And in terms of expanding on the sort of whole Ewok mythology, it does that. As I said, it's me and my obsession with continuity and timeline and stuff, and it's a little bit difficult to buy everything about this as having happened prior to Return of the Jedi, but at the same time, they weren't too bad, and I definitely preferred the second one. But that also had its problems as well. But but they had some heart to them, and there was a story that you could follow. So not bad at all. So yeah, I didn't hate them like I thought I was going to.
Yes, I mean, I have to say though, I wish there was like the release of these films had a better presentation than they actually have. They are kind of like, I know they're on DVD, but they just kind of like, we'll just release them, and so they're there, and
just stick them on and churn them out, and that's it. We'll make money off it, and
because there's it's part of that wonderful sort of culture around Star Wars, because as well as having the Ewok films, we had the Ewok cartoons, we had like the Droids cartoons, and those are really hard to find now. When as a kid growing up watching those on TV, I loved that kind of stuff. They may not be canon, but it's it's part of that universe. It may not be canon, as I say, but it's still it's still kind of part of my love for Star Wars, and along with like the comic books and the books and stuff like that, and the video games, that all of that stuff is still kind of out there for you to get, but the sort of cartoons and the films in some sense aren't, and it should be out there for us.
It certainly kept Anthony Daniels in a regular paycheck, didn't it?
Yes, well, Anthony Daniels owes his whole career to Lucasfilm. He just won't let it go. Yeah. I'm Otzi 3PO. My name is Anthony Daniels. I now talk like this. Anyway, talking about cartoons, let's move on to our next film, which originally was supposed to be the sort of 4-part opening to the TV series, but George Lucas decided, let's release this theatrically as a film, and we got Star Wars: The Clone Wars.
Yeah, released in 2008 as a sort of introduction to the Clone Wars television series, and as a sort of follow-up to what George Lucas describes as the pilot of the Clone Wars, which was a hand-drawn animated series that came out in 2003, 2004, and they were available as little webisodes that sort of bridged some of the gap between the end of Attack of the Clones and the beginning of Revenge of the Sith.
Yes.
And obviously they released this film and the subsequent series, which I think ran for 5 seasons.
No,
I want to say.
I think it's 7, and there was an 8th series planned, but it was made but never released.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
yeah.
This was directed by Dave Filoni, who has since gone on to be the sort of showrunner for the Rebels animated TV series as well. This introduction movie. What did we think about this one then?
I wasn't a fan of it. I remember enjoying the animated, as you say, webisodes, the stuff that was done by the guy who did Samurai Jack, and it had this like unique style, and we got the introduction of General Grievous, who seemed to be an absolute badass in these cartoons, but yet when he turned up in Revenge of the Sith was nothing like this character. I mean, in the cartoon, he was so dangerous to Jedi, it was ridiculous.
This was before Mace Windu crushed his lungs or whatever it was. Yeah. Did anyone go? I went to the cinema to see the Clone Wars. This feature. Did anybody else? Or
No.
am I the only saddo that went?
Go to the cinema.
Okay.
I didn't go to the cinema. No.
Okay.
It didn't inspire me enough to actually make the effort. The problem is it was too commercial. You know, the release of the film was preceded 12 months before by the release of the new toys. You know, it just seemed to be like a money-making exercise on something that nobody was particularly interested in. I mean, if there was Clone Wars and big space battles and things and they were going to do it live action, everybody would go, oh, great. And he goes, I'm going to make it, you know, a cartoon which its whole structure is aimed at teens. You know, the storylines, the character looks, you know, you could even say it was aimed at the Japanese market. You know, because the characters suddenly changed and looked far more anime than they'd ever done before. So I don't know. I was always prejudiced against it. You know, it's not a great film either. You know, it's an extended episode of those short TV series. You know.
Yeah, it does feel very TV wise. I mean, the plot being that Jabba the Hutt's son has been kidnapped, and Obi-Wan and Anakin have to try and rescue them, and also Anakin's now got a apprentice called Ahsoka Tano, and you know, somebody who is introduced in this film but yet has no part within the rest of the prequels. She does not turn up in Revenge of the Sith at all, and there's no mention of Anakin actually having having an apprentice, even though this character still carries on into the Star Wars canon, especially in Rebels, because she turns up again there. And it's this weird thing where, you know, just talking about her character, you know, she plays a big, you know, she comes across in the film like Scrappy Doo. You know,
that's never a good sign, is it?
She is, I don't know, it's a character that's created to appeal to a certain democratic, I don't know. Yeah. And, you know, she's somebody that doesn't play any part within the films, but she's here in the cartoon. But I think especially in this movie, I actually watched the actual TV series, and I found her be less grating in that than she was in this.
Different
yeah. Yeah.
It makes a difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, I have to say the TV series was a lot better.
But surely, Simon, the fact that she's so irritating does not explain Anakin's hatred of younglings, and therefore give motivation to the massacre of the younglings in the next film. No,
I always took his motivation for that, for the bad acting those kids gave in those films. Obviously they were like some producers' kids that got put into this film. It's especially in like Attack of the Clones, that one kid that goes, maybe it was erased from the computer, and Dion's going, young ones, I loved them.
I mean, this film. I mean, okay, we saw some battles in it, which is good because like we were saying the other day, it is Star Wars, not Star politics, right? So we actually got we get to see the Clone Wars, which was largely skipped over in the movies, apart from the end of episode 2 and the beginning of episode 3. So we get that sort of gap in between, that 3-year gap or whatever it is, filled in with this series. But the trouble with this film, to sort of kick things off, was apparently it was George Lucas's idea to, because he was very involved in this, to have Jabba the Hutt be in it and have that the kidnapping of his kid and whatever to be the sort of main thrust of the plot. But it was a bit of a weak one, because they're all like, oh well, if we don't get the Hutts on side, they're going to sort of choke off our shipping lanes or whatever. So the Jedi have got to help them and all this sort of thing. Whilst there's these obviously massive battles going on, and of course they had to make it all very kiddified as well. So it was all about, again, George came up with these, but it was all about nicknames like Stinky and Fly Guy and what did he call her? Nips or something. They've all got their like sort of silly very kiddified sort of nicknames and stuff. And I've not seen all of the Clone Wars series. I'm quite a fan of the Rebels series, but I've not seen all of the Clone Wars. But my understanding is some of the episodes of the series are actually very, very good and a lot better than this initial feature length episode.
Season 1 of the Clone Wars TV series is very well written, and you get some base on characters, even though the stories are sort of spread out and not connected very well. After that, it becomes so chaotic. And I think that stems from the film. The film is a bit chaotic. It doesn't have a story about the Clone Wars. It has a side issue, and then the Clone Wars is the background to it again.
Yeah, a bit. Sounds familiar.
Yeah, they call it the Clone Wars, and you go, well, yeah, I saw a bit of the Clone Wars as well, passing going this way. So, and I think that's the TV series. The first season, they had some really interesting storylines, which I would have thought would have made a better sort of, a better idea for the film. But, as has been said before, he seemed to be obsessed with this Jabba the Hutt story and reuniting the Hutts with the universe, which I don't particularly get. But it was so commercial. And if you watch the series and Rebels as well, it's characters appear 12 months after their little toys have come out and their little characters and things, and which was driving which. And I think it shows. I mean, it was far more about, how can we, sell new toys, new this,
But Star Wars has always been that, to be fair. I mean,
Star Wars has become that.
yeah, I mean, let's take the new film, right? The Porgs, the only reason they're even there, like at least Ewoks had some involvement in the actual story. The Porgs are just there to sell plush toys.
No, mate, no, they're not. The Porgs are there because the island they filmed on was filled with puffins, and it was easier to CGI over the puffins than it was to try and remove them.
Yeah.
So
but by the same merit, they're a big. They're going to sell toys, aren't they? You know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this has been one of the problems, I think, as well. Kind of started in Return of the Jedi, and kind of you've seen it more and more with each film. That you felt like a lot of the characters in there weren't there for the sake of the story. They were there because they would make an interesting toy or figure or collectible, you know.
Definitely.
Yeah. And it's I mean, it's I mean, in the Clone War films, you got a lot of new vehicles. You got these sort of walking tanks that you see them scaling up the wall with and stuff like that. And these tanks have also appeared in Rebels as well. And so, you know, again, it's just more you know, collectibles and toys. But
actually, with Rebels, they've done it the other way as well, which I love. When I was a kid, one of the things I had was this. It never existed in the film, but I had a thing called an Imperial Troop Transporter.
Yes,
and it was basically a thing where you could put like six figures around the edge, and then like a pilot and a co-pilot in the front, and it was supposed to be like a land speeder type thing, yeah. And what makes me laugh, what I love is because the creators of Rebels, sort of grew up in the same generation as us and had those things as kids. They've kind of incorporated them into the world of Star Wars now in the animation, and I must admit I did get a bit of a kick out of that. I was like, oh, that's cool, they've included what used to be a Kenner toy of the vehicles.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the things I actually like about that series over the Clone Wars. Is, you know, as you say, that vehicle, which for us was a toy but which never appeared in the films, but there it is, you know, being used in this cartoon series. And they also the walkers that they have, which the design came from the Marvel comics, because that appeared in like a Marvel comic. So, you know, there's all these sort of wonderful touches of that, you know, and also the fact that it's taking place in the original trilogy's universe, and it's not the prequel universe.
Nostalgia. Yes. We love it. Yeah.
But I mean, the problem with the Clone Wars is, I think when Obi-Wan Kenobi mentioned it in A New Hope, it sounded like this amazing thing, and you had these ideas of what it was like. And, you know, you didn't even know what a clone was, but the Clone Wars, wow, that sounds amazing. And then to see it in this animation form, it just doesn't live up to what your imagination. I mean, and it doesn't even come close. I mean, it seems to be, you know, because it's this sort of no stakes, because you've got two armies that are just mass produced. You know, there's apart from the Jedi, there's nobody who has family or a life in these battles. It's just robots versus clones. And
Roger.
Yeah, and it's, no matter how many of these get killed, you can just produce some more somewhere.
Well,
Clive,
that's Luke's ideal. Don't care about your characters, do what you like with them, because you don't. Most of his characters are not accessible. I think the Clone Wars is a classic example. You know, if they are drawn characters, then they have even less history, less backgrounds and family and things. You don't connect. It seems that when he made the Clone Wars and went for this idea, it was, as you said, it just disconnects you even more. If you didn't have background from the films from some of these characters, what would you care about anybody? What would you buy into these characters? How would you buy into these characters? There's nothing to them.
Yeah, it's a bit of a spectacle fest. But I mean, Clive, you hadn't seen this, had you, before this week? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I avoided this like the plague when it came out because I hated, even though I went and saw them all, of course, I hated the prequels. So the idea of
more than the Ewok movies. I'm just joking.
Yeah. But you know, the idea of seeing more of these characters, who I had no real love for, and then I saw the trailer and I thought, I mean, it's weird because the computer animation, it sort of looks a bit computer gamey, and yet the computer games that Lucasfilm Arts was putting out at that time look better than this. So it didn't look good at all. So yeah, I came to this fresh, and I was thinking, okay, well maybe this is good. We do actually get to see some Clone Wars a little bit, but it's just very dull. And I mean, the thing it reminded me of was kind of the Starship Troopers animated series.
Yes,
especially the way it starts, because although we get a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, we then get this very Starship Troopers style voiceover telling us about the state of the war, and then the evil Count Dooku came down and did, and it's sort of the only thing that's missing is this. Would you like to know more? At the end of it, it's so Starship Troopersy, and then the fact you've got all these kind of, armored clone troopers who, again, it feels like that sort of, grunts on the ground in the battles, So then when it became this weird kind of, Anakin's got a Padawan learner now, which, I have to say, as far as Yoda's mistakes goes, giving Anakin a Padawan learner, any kind of apprentice, it's like, I kind of feeling like, bad idea. This seems, it's, yeah. It felt long to me. It's correct me if I'm wrong, but the actual series, they're like 20-minute episodes or something like that.
That's correct. Yeah.
This is 2 hours.
Yeah, 1 hour 38. But yeah, it's long.
It's getting on for 2 hours, and it felt long. It felt even when we were just in the sort of Clone Warsy bit before we got into the whole rescue mission for Stinky, I found it was slightly giving me a headache just because of the incessant laser fire. It just sort of, after a while, I felt a little bit worn down by it, and it's nice to sort of, you get some original voice talent in there, with Christopher Lee and so on, but yeah, after a while, it just kind of washed over me, and I just, it wasn't for me. I mean, yeah.
I thought the animation wasn't exciting either. There was nothing new. There was nothing clever. There was nothing that drew you in. It was.
Yeah, well, I mean,
the animation style was bland.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's that thing like you were saying, Clive, about how some of the video games actually look better. I mean, the problem was Lucas's whole thing for this was he didn't want it to be photorealistic and look like the movies. He wanted it to be stylized, and that's kind of what you get with the animated shows is you get like a stylized version of the likeness of the people and the ships and the characters and all that sort of thing. And you're right, you look at the video games where they're trying to do the opposite and make you part of the film universe, so therefore you've got things that do look practically photorealistic. And so straight away you've got, even though this is set in the same universe and whatever, you've got that sort of disconnect in the fact that they haven't gone there. They've made a particular sort of stylistic choice with these shows.
Yeah, it makes it look like they're easier to actually press into plastic. You know, the actual
Well, yeah, quite.
characters. So,
Yeah, plasticine hair and beards and stuff. Yeah, you know, it's you know, that's kind of the choice they made, and they haven't gone quite so extreme with Rebels, but even that, you know, has a very sort of stylized look to the characters for sure. But yeah, so overall, then we're not. I mean, what about you, Alex? You've not said much about this. Did you like it or not really?
it was tiring. It was honestly one of those films that everything about it was tiring. You know, I always liked anime, and I love when sci-fi burst on with Akira when it was, you know, globally released, and you know, animation could have a style and an energy. And when they said, "Oh, Clone Wars animation," thought, well, yeah, that could be brilliant, but then George Lucas is involved, and then it's going to be staid and uninteresting because he was so involved. I mean, unfortunately, everything that's been great about Star Wars has always been when he's been pushed further to the rear, you know, and not involved in a lot of the decisions.
It's when he's collaborated more, I think, is more fair to say.
Definitely, but it's just, you know, it was just pure George Lucas, and I think that, you know, it reminded me of things like Howard the Duck, you know, and things like that. You know, it's one of his things. You know, I love this idea, I love this, and you know, I love the original Howard the Duck cartoons, you know, the actual comics. But you know, then he destroyed that, you know, in film. He could just play, and he's not great at building universes on his own. He needs help. And I think that showed. I mean, choice of the animation style was dull. The storyline, again, avoided the whole point of this was the Clone Wars. You know, I like sci-fi adventure, which, you know, Star Wars is. But it has to be an adventure, and you have to go along with the adventure, and you have to go with the characters and on their journey. And in this, they didn't really do much, didn't really go many places, and they really didn't care what they were doing anyway. It's just sad. I mean, some of the following on series, there were some good episodes, but overall, that was just as bad. Rebels was a bit better. It seemed to have a better writing team. As Keith said, the animation style, they changed it slightly. But there was nothing to it. It really was just bland, cardboard, cutout, nothing, which is sad, you know?
Yeah.
But, I mean, and also I felt that when it came out, you know, we just gotten through the prequels and we were just happy it was over. And so to be more prequel stuff was kind of like, oh, please, can we have enough now, you know?
Yeah, but this is a license. The point of the Clone Wars and the animation, this new venture, this new direction, was you should have given him much more freedom to go where he wanted, do what he likes. You know, it was going into a long-running TV show where he can have lots of episodes of characters and things like that. But no, you know, it's like, let's just bore everybody before the TV series starts. Hooray!
Yeah.
Well, come on, let's move on to something that's a lot more exciting. So, you know, we started off with, I would say, the worst one. So let's end with the best one, and that being Rogue One.
Yes. Well, yeah, my Star Wars Rogue One. I'll tell you what, I watched it again today.
Yeah.
And I just love this film. I really can't criticize it. You know, I know about all the controversy about the you know, the reshoots and all of this stuff, but you know what they've done with it works. It's seamless. It's not like Justice League reshoots where they, you know, you can see the bits that were reshot because they stand out like a sore thumb. You know, this is tight. It's together. You know, this is the Star Wars film that I'd have wanted to make or be in. And and you know, as irony would have it, it was a English guy in his 40s that made it. So there you go. But yeah, I absolutely love Rogue One. Love it.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when it was announced and coming out of Force Awakens, you know, being quite excited by that film, thinking, yeah, we're going to get Rogue One next year. We're going to get like, a sort of kind of war film within Star Wars, because that's how they were kind of selling it. You know, this whole idea of like a squad or a battalion trying to get Death Star plans, and that image of them in the bunker with the weapons and everything, looking like, you know, they're on their last stand, being surrounded by Imperial forces that they're having to fight off. You know, I was like, that's going to be really good. And of course, that wasn't the film we got. We got more or less a heist film, where the battle was a diversion to, you know, so that the rebels could go in and steal the plans. I do enjoy the film. I think it's really good. It's always great to be back in that original trilogy's universe. You know, back on Yavin 4, seeing the old ships and everything. Though I do find the first half is a bit, it's a little bit muddled. You know, it's this weird thing where you have a main character she doesn't really matter in the story. You know, yes, you know, because we know that in the original, you know, she rebels. And they wanted, you know, the mission was, you know, that they wanted to find out more about this weapon from the trailers we saw. But in the film, it's suddenly, you know, because she knew, I'm just getting the character's name, Saw Gerrera.
Saw Gerrera.
I was going to call him Shea Gerrera, but Saw Gerrera.
Well, not surprising with the names. This is actually a George Lucas creation.
Yes.
Even though he obviously didn't write this film or have anything to do with this film.
Yeah.
The character of Saw Gerrera he did create.
Yes.
So for the Clone Wars.
Yeah, so you know, she's there to make an introduction, and then of course she saw her father's message. You know, then they go to the planet. You know, it's that weird thing. I didn't quite understand why they went to the planet. I don't know if they were there to rescue him or not. I mean, we know that Cassian Andor's mission was to kill him. But, you know, it didn't... Yeah. And I also find this whole idea that Galen Erso put this flaw into the Death Star as his revenge against the Empire for, you know, what they did to him, you know, killing his wife and, you know, making him separated from his daughter. When in New Hope, the rebels examined the Death Star's plans and found a weakness, you know? And it's like somebody somewhere went, oh, that's a big flaw, isn't it? Why would the Empire have a weakness? Because they thought the space station was such a thing that they could never be destroyed. And some little porthole, nobody's ever going to find that. So, yeah. Yeah, so I these kind of reconning of that I'm not a big fan of, but I find it a very enjoyable film. I enjoy the characters in it. I think the Donnie Yen and the other characters, the guys, the Sherritt and Bays, I think they're great characters, and I wish we had a lot more of them in it than we get. I mean, when they actually elevate the story when they come on screen. And the second half is great, and seeing the space battle and the battle on the ground, brilliant. I just love the second half. Second half's brilliant, and the introduction of the U-wing is another classic ship to go with the X-wing and the Y-wing and the A-wing. I'm waiting for the Z-Wing to come out. I'm sure that's the next one.
Yes, it flies like a boomerang or something. Yeah.
The V-Wing, yes.
Simon, I tend to agree with you on the first half in some respects, but the first half of the movie was toned down by Disney because they had a reaction to the characters that they couldn't let them all be killed. I mean, that's the reaction they had to people who actually they showed the actual scripts to and the structure to and some of the early drafts to, and it's Disney's about appealing to everybody. So if you make the characters too engaging, you get too into the characters, people will be horrified if they all die. I mean, this is classic movie.
Yeah, but I mean that's the point. I mean, Gladiator works because you feel for Maximus. So when his death at the end is devastating. It's
one character, and you're talking about a completely different director and a completely different story structure. Everybody expects Roman gladiators to be cut to pieces and everybody to die. It's not. This was a family movie, which is Star Wars are, and you can see in the first half of the movie that they've cut storyline out of the characters. So you can see that there's bits missing. You don't get that grip of the characters. You don't feel for the characters that much, which is great because they're all going to die. It's a classic, Second World War movie. Most of the people are going to die in it, so you don't really get to know them. You sort of introduce them and say hello.
Well, then they kind of screwed up then because the best character in K2SO, when he dies, it's absolutely devastating.
That's a robot. See, we bond to them so much easier. I don't know why, but we always do. Force Awakens, you have this stupid little round robot-y thing that goes around and beeps at you. Going back in history, and you go, oh, it's so cute. Isn't he lovely? And so I don't know why we do it, but we do. And to be honest, he was probably the most fleshed out character of all of them.
Yes, yeah.
After rewrite as well. He had a journey. It's a really good point, Simon. Actually, if you think about it, he just does have a journey. He's he's the guy who's there who's crystal and everything, and you're all terrible. Blah, 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 blah.
Well, all he wanted was a gun, and then Jyn Erso gave him a gun at the end. He was so happy.
He was, and gets to use it once, doesn't he?
Yes.
I don't know. It's a fabulous film, though. If you look at it as just pure sci-fi, it's like it's like a Bridge Too Far or Where Eagles Dare war movies, where you're going into the impregnable fortress to get the information and get out or whatever. And all these things that it's great, and it has a really, really, really large cast that you sort of play with, but you never get to know them very well. It's beautifully structured, especially through the middle and into the final battles.
Yeah.
The characters are, forming this unit and coming to a, understanding and I like the film, as a war movie in that respect. But I do wish that they hadn't quite cut as much personality out of so many of the characters as they did, because then it would have been, it's fun, adventure, and the war elements to it, but then it would have been moving as well, because weren't devastated when they all die at the end. Which you should be devastated they all die at the end, but you weren't. But that's Disney's choice. And, they didn't want people to be upset, because it's meant to be a movie that everybody can watch.
But Alex, I was under the impression that a lot of the reshoots were to soften the Felicity Jones character, Jyn Erso, because especially with some of the scenes we saw in the that don't appear in the final movie that were in the trailers. She
Yeah.
comes across a lot more kind of, unsympathetic, sort of doesn't want to be involved, just basically really sort of spiky and confrontational.
No,
And
yeah.
so if they made these, it seems that they were trying to make the characters more likable. I think there are some, sort of interesting choices to show people involved in the rebellion who aren't, the sort of just the guys in the white hats, that they are, like people, like a character like Cassian Andor, who does some properly shady things, and he gets his moment of redemption, right, and that's his arc. But previously, everyone in the rebellion is a goody, right?
But definitely, but she comes from a shady background. The point is that, for me, you look at the characters and you go, all of these people have done terrible things. All these people have had a terrible past, live pretty much for themselves, and I mean, you get a flavour of that, but you don't actually get to know them. And making her softer and smoother and stuff like that took away her characters, means you couldn't bond with her, you couldn't see her, you couldn't see the journeys that she makes the decision that, well, I'm going to do this and die.
Okay, right. Sorry, I was misunderstanding your point, I think. I mean, that was how you responded to that, but I feel like that the reason that they made the choice was that they felt it would help people engage with her more. But you're saying it had the opposite effect for you.
Well, it made it. There was nothing until we get to the point where she's standing on the ship, going, "Come on, guys, we're all going to go and die together." She's sort of, yeah. They left me alone, and my dad's been somewhere, but I haven't really been bothered about him. It doesn't, it's nothing. There was nothing visceral, nothing real about her. It was, I mean, my only problem with the film is the characters had so little to them. There wasn't enough background. There wasn't enough understanding of where they'd come from, but then again, it's a war movie, so if you take it on that side of it, and look at it as classic war movie, it's brilliant. You don't know too much about the characters, you get little snippets, guns from Navarone, it's like all the characters get little tiny snippets of their backgrounds between each other, and it's great. But when you look at it and you see all the original trailers and the TV skits and stuff like that they did, and the bits cut out, and you think, wait a sec, it's like Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, where he kicks the woman into the harbour in the trailer that you never see on the film. It's one of the funniest things I've ever seen, and it never made it to the film, and it really summed up his character, but. Again, it's, it would have made it much darker, and I would have quite liked that. But maybe, not saying that they did wrong, because I really enjoyed the film. It really was. For me, it's probably the best Star Wars movie, since Empire. It had everything that you wanted from sci-fi and adventure and action and war. It was. And we don't have to wait for a sequel that could be terrible, because there won't be one.
Yes, I mean, that is the nice thing. It is a standalone film. There is not going to be the continuing adventures of Jyn Erso and Cassian Andor.
Jyn Erso the younger.
Yeah.
Well, there is a sequel. There is a sequel called Star Wars, I believe.
Oh, can I just say something? After watching this, I went and watched A New Hope the next day, and it does not match up. For the obvious reason, you get the ending, you get to see, everybody loves the ending with Darth Vader going to town, which, it's great, and it does look like it's something. It reminds me of the corridor scene in Akira, when Kaneda is taking on like all the guards and just like, you know, throwing them up in the ceiling, and Darth Vader says, you know, lightsabering and all this stuff. I mean, it's really, you know, it's the stuff of horror films. Yeah, so, but then at the beginning of Star Wars, he's a little tired, you know. He must be, that effort must have taken it out of him, because he just walks in and looks around, you know. He just goes, where's the correlation between, you know, this Darth Vader and that Darth Vader?
That's a good point about the correlation between the films, isn't it? It's then you have to come back
I think
to
it
the
works.
CGI characters. You know, you basically, you know, the
I think it works.
characters. You know?
It's a great moment. It's something you didn't think was going to happen. I mean, the whole bit when the capital ship's trying to escape, and Darth Vader's Star Destroyer turns up and just knocks them aside, is, you know, it's just great. And you know, as I say, that scene, it's so enjoyable. But then you go, but as I say, then you go and watch A New Hope, and you know, you go, wow, he must have got, he needed a rest, you know, all this chasing the plans.
Yeah,
and also the fact, yeah.
Rosy cheeked, yeah.
Well, yes, that was kind of funny when her cameo at the end, very CGI-tastic, where she goes, was it they what's this? I can't remember what the line the guy says. It's like, what's this? And she goes, hope. It does make me laugh at the end, that bit.
It's funny, yeah. Like, do you know, it's one of those things that I'm not quite sure why they put it in. You know, I mean, you could have just seen somebody hand off the plans to you know, somebody in a white cloak, you know, with their back to and stuff like that, and that would have been fabulous.
Yes.
But to actually then CGI her and you know, have that line, it's like they're choices, I suppose. I mean, it doesn't ruin the film, doesn't destroy the film.
Well, I mean, the other thing as well was that the blockade runner was supposedly, you know, on a mission to get Obi-Wan Kenobi from Tatooine. And, you know, and from what I understand in New Hope, that they received a transmission of these plans, not from a planet, but from, say, another ship. So to have the actual blockade runner within the belly of that capital ship seemed really weird to me, because they even say in the film, you know, you have Bail Organa there on Yavin, and he says, oh yes, I'm going to send somebody to get my, you know, your old Jedi friend, and yeah, I trust her, you know, explicitly. So yeah, it was kind of weird that she was actually part of that battle.
Yeah, I suppose. But then, you know, if you just throw a quick attention to it, it's fine. But when you make a point of it that, you know, you have to come and talk to her and she has to have the line that takes into the next movie, it's I mean, why, if you go back to the Governor Tarkin, you know, it's like he was brilliant. It's like, you know, much nastier than he was in A New Hope. You know, and the actor's been dead for what, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, I must admit, the first time I saw it, and when it was just like, it was his reflection in the window, I thought, oh, that's a really interesting way of doing it. You know, you're kind of hiding it quite well. And then he turned around and went, oh, okay. And then there was other scenes. So the first time I watched it, those scenes kind of knocked me out, because it's like, yeah, we know this is not Peter Cushing, or, you know.
Yeah, Peter Cushing's, even though he was trying to be much harder in New Hope,
yeah.
His CGI doppelganger is a lot scarier and, you know, much harsher.
Yeah, but I mean, with subsequent viewings, I don't mind it so much. You know, it's no Jar Jar.
No, I enjoyed it. I thought it was quite well thought out. You know,
yeah.
I thought the sort of Darth Vader is sort of well thought out. You know, not impinging on the story too much. You know, I think that they kept quite a lot of that out. You know, you know, the Emperor's Wear. You know, it's all the things that to keep the story away. You know, it's a side. It's outside of the main issues. I thought that worked quite well. I know the production values were fabulous. The design, and it was great fun. You know, and actually watching the Death Star partially destroy things instead of wiping out planets in the blink of an eye was great fun.
Yes,
you know?
yeah. I have to say, one of the things I quite liked, even though I don't understand quite why it's in the film, but I do like the fact that we have Darth Vader's castle, which is on, I guess it's Mustafar, or a volcano planet. And that was one of those things that I believe came out of the comic books or original, you know, from some of the fiction. So to actually see that and to, you know.
Wasn't that based on some original concept art by Ralph McQuarrie?
That's right.
Well, yes, but I do remember that the Darth Vader's castle, because it was Darth Vader's castle, the Ralph McQuarrie stuff was the Emperor's throne room, which was based on a volcano planet. So we're actually talking about Darth Vader's castle. This is his own fortress that he had. It was something that came, I do remember, if it must have come out of the comic books, or maybe it was from Splinter of the Mind Eyes, but yeah.
Splinter of the Mind Eyes is the one that I would have thought it would come from. Yeah. Because that predates most of the others.
Yeah. So it was great to see that, but it did seem to be a bit too much that the Ben Mendelsohn character would fly all the way to this volcano planet just for this one meeting. You know?
Yeah, it's also the one bit in the film where they don't actually put, because one of the things this film does do, you know, which is sort of outside of the other, it's really weird. I look at it and I think, wherever there's blue text, they've kept it like the other Star Wars stuff, and wherever there's yellow text, they've gone different. But one of the things they don't do, you keep getting titles of every planet they're at, because obviously it does jump around quite a bit. Yeah. But the one that you don't get is when they go to Mustafar. It's like they missed that for some reason, and it's like, why didn't they put that up? They put it for every other planet.
Because it's meant to be ambiguous, isn't it?
I suppose so. Yes.
No.
But yeah, it's you know, I must admit, for me, it really is the best Star Wars film since the original trilogy, for me, by a long way. You know, I just think, you know, it's kind of got that Magnificent Seven stroke Wild Bunch meets Star Wars feel to it, and you know, it's I just think it's just works really well. And as I said, I know about obviously the fact that the trailer's got loads of stuff that didn't end up in the film for whatever reason and stuff, but you know, I still think that in the version that we've got, it all holds together really well, and it works.
Yeah, in the end, Keith, I don't know if they'd stayed with the original and the characters had that little bit more, you know, hard edge, that it would have worked. You know, it would have been nice to see. It would have been nice to see. I think it would have made it a bit harder, a bit darker. You know.
I'd have liked that even more.
But it's a great film. And as you said, it really holds together. It's really enjoyable from start to beginning, you know, right through, and brilliant ending, you know, and it's a classic thing, isn't it? You know, everybody dies. Brilliant. Hooray!
Yeah, and they went there, you know, which was great. They, you know, they didn't sort of wimp out of that in any way, shape or form, you know, which again makes it tie into the rest of the saga that much better.
Indeed, yes.
You know, so
Clive, what did you think?
Well, I mean, I concur with a lot of what you're saying. I think it's a film with a great ending, but there's a lot of choppy stuff in there as well, but which I kind of forgive, because the ending leaves you with such a sort of tremendous sort of rush of kind of Star Wars feels. You know, that it's like, oh man, this feels like Star Wars. It feels like my Star Wars. It's like, you know, the Darth Vader scene, you know, I was kind of like, I was like a little kid in the cinema when I was watching that. it was so effective. Obviously, I mean, you know, the end scene, not the one where he's sort of, you know, playing games with Krennic. Although that was kind of amusing. But there's some strange things in there. You know, the Sol Guerrera and the Mind Squid stuff is it's like, what is that about? You know, and yeah, it's sort of it takes some odd tracks. I mean, I think one thing Gareth Edwards is very good at, and you see it in his other movies, you know, whether it's, you know, Monsters or Godzilla, is this thing of really showing scale well. You know, so you get some really nice shot choices which you haven't seen in Star Wars before, where you really get a sense of just how massive Star Destroyers are and just how sort of small the Rebels are in comparison. And, you know, it just sort of these just sort of, little sort of directorial moments, which I think work really well. I do think Jin's character, it does, you know, for me, Keith, I do feel that there are those joins there. But, you know, ultimately, it's the ending sort of hides a lot of those flaws. So, yeah,
well,
I really enjoy it.
At least their hair stays the same.
Well, that's the important thing, I guess. Yeah.
I tell you the one thing that makes me laugh about this film, it's this Sol Guerrera character. Every time he gets that oxygen mask out, I always think he's going to go like full Frank from Blue Velvet. You know?
Yeah.
It's like, Daddy wants to fuck.
Yeah. Either that or he's going to have a helium voice. One or the other.
Talk about an underused character.
Yes.
Well.
Yeah.
He sort of shows up on a hatch and then has, you know, a wheezing fit in his little base, and then he's dead. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and the fact that you have like this extremist in the rebels. You know, you thought the Imperials thought the rebels were bad, but they actually have somebody who's even worse, who's sort of more extreme, will just, you know, take them on head on and doesn't care about casualties and stuff like that. You know, was a kind of an interesting character, but you know,
but again, is how much to be see of him? How much did we know about him?
Not much, and I want to know what this dream is that he needs protecting. Protect the dream. It's like what?
Yeah, exactly. See, a lot of lines like that, even though they're quite arresting in the performances and things like that, suggest that there's dialogue just being cut wholesale from scenes. You know, it's
that, or it's written to be trailer fodder. You know, it sounds great in a trailer.
Yeah, but then what purpose does it serve for the film?
Exactly, that's why it's trailer fodder. I mean, you just take the line from Justice League when Flash asks Bruce Wayne, "What do you do?" and he goes, "I'm rich." You know,
now what's your superpower?
Oh right.
And he's like, "Yes, I'm rich." Yeah.
But it's like it should have been, "I'm Batman." It's easy.
That doesn't work, see, in that vein, because he has no superpower. You know, he can cantankerous old git. You know, it's basically what Batman is.
Yes, but he's Batman. Doesn't matter what his superpower is. He's Batman.
So?
You guys don't watch How It Should Have Ended, do you?
I know what you mean, Simon.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Oh dear, I watch too much YouTube. There you go.
Gee.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, the worrying thing is this Rogue One gonna set a trend for these standalones? You know, the next one is
It's Solo. It's the Han Solo film.
So the problem with that is Solo has to survive. So's the Wookiee.
Yeah.
So have big.
Yeah, but the third one will be Many Bothans Die.
Yeah, we know nothing about that story, do we? No.
Well, we know that many Bothans died. We do know
yes.
that much, but
Thousands of Bothans.
that might have to involve Ewoks as well.
Ewoks riding bottom.
Yeah. Well,
But,
yeah, I do wonder if with these standalone films, are we going to get another Ewok standalone film?
I don't think so.
Yeah. You sure?
No, because Disney,
Well-
Disney do their due diligence and check the stats, and Ewoks on box office.
Do you mean that we're not going to get the Jar Jar Binks standalone film?
I think we won't get the Jar Jar Binks now.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing is Disney have, because of the success of these three films, is they're delaying the TV series again.
Mm.
That might be 2021 now. So, and that could have been Jar Jar Binks returns.
Well, apparently, Lucas had written over 100 episodes of the TV series,
and they binned that because that was based around Knights of the Old Republic, and Disney just wanted the TV rights to that so they could continue with the games. So,
right?
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, we're going to get more and more Star Wars, and it's going to go in a lot of different directions. And it's that old thing, the sort of classic fans, the Generation X, if you like, of Star Wars. We need to let go of it and get on board the Millennial Falcon.
I disagree. I think Abrams reinvigorated the series and brought it back to give us a new hope of actually getting some Star Wars that we want, that we can enjoy. I think he really has opened the door to that and really pushed it hard in that direction. And I think Rogue One was probably, a consequence of his input and his direction that he'd taken the series again.
Yeah.
Because Rogue One felt like Star Wars,
Yeah. And I hope that Disney, I think I'd like to see like the original cut of this. I know they're not going to do it, but it's somewhere down the line. Go on, put it on a Blu-ray, DVD. It would be fantastic to see what it could have been.
Disney like a good money earner, and I think take it a few years down the road, and I think you probably will. Yeah,
and I think I hope that they release the original trilogy in its original state. No. I don't know how difficult that's going to be.
They can't do that. They cannot do that. They do not have the rights to amend the Star Wars that was preceded the purchase of the franchise. Unless Lucas changes his mind, not a chance on hell.
Hold on, Lucas changing his mind.
That may happen then. Or it might be like it was with Kubrick, that after his death, certain films that was then made available, like Clockwork Orange and also Fear and Desire, which is the film that he took off the shelf for a long time.
Have you seen Lucas in the last 20 years? He looks like he's been sort of, frozen in exactly the same. It's like the guy's going to outlive us all.
Yeah.
It's very disturbing.
Well, I think on that point I'm
not sure that's a good note.
No, is it not? Or what's the Lucas is going to outlive us all?
Well, I mean, we have to respect the Lucas, because we wouldn't be having this conversation if it wasn't for him. You know what I mean? So
definitely, but I would never forgive him for the prequels. It's that simple. I can forgive him for Ewoks, and even
not Jar Jar Binks. Yeah,
not Jar Jar Binks. No, it's that simple, really.
Yeah.
Well, any to finish up then, any closing thoughts from each of you about Star Wars and where it's going?
I have some thoughts, and I guess it's just from watching these movies and TV specials that we've just watched, and I sort of feel like you've almost got that there's a lot of, it feels like there's a lot of choices open now in terms of how you take Star Wars on, and those, and obviously we've got the completion of the current main trilogy, and now apparently we're going to have a new trilogy with all new characters. But the idea of this sort of, if they keep up with the anthology movie every other year, what will those standalone movies be like? And I feel like we've got almost two different templates. One is just to go back and almost fully embrace them just being nostalgia fests, where it's fan service, they're filling in, quote unquote gaps in stories, and sort of, did we really need to? Don't get me wrong. I love Rogue One, but did we really need to know how the rebels got hold of the plans for the Death Star? Not really.
Yes, damn it.
No, we didn't, Keith. No, but ultimately we got a great film out of it. But and now we're going, and now this sort of going back to young Han Solo. This all feels of kind of like, it's sort of following the sort of template set by Clone Wars. This sort of like to sort of fill in the gaps. Whereas I almost, I almost wish that they would take more the example of the Ewok movies, and I don't mean by do them cheaply and with poor effects for television. I mean take the story forward. It's a big universe. Not all the stories have to be about the Skywalker, saga and the big battles. They can be smaller stories. It's a big universe. There's already tons of different alien races. Even if you are still looking at rebels or resistance, or the kind of or the ins and outs of the Empire or the First Order, there's plenty of scope for different new stories, and that's without even sort of going into things that have already been part explored in comics and books and various different extended media. I feel like that's almost what those are for. That's what those have done really well in the past. So now to have the films go down that road as well, do we really want that? I don't know. I mean, if they're all as good as Rogue One, sure, but I sort of wish that they take a bit more, a few more chances.
The thing is that there's so many stories out there to tell, aren't there? You're right. That's the thing that I think that, we're going to get the third in this new trilogy, and, it's just going to be, well, you've told the same story all over again. There's so much sci-fi written, so many stories written. It can't be that difficult, can it? And I think Clive's right. They need to go in a new direction. I think they need to try something new. They say new characters, but it needs to be a new story.
Well, I agree. I agree completely. And it is a massive universe, the Star Wars one, with a lot of history and stuff and cultures. So absolutely, I'm in total agreement that they need to take it in different places, which isn't going to please everyone, but is what it's about, and I'm all for it. I only wish I was involved in some of it. That would be great.
Don't worry, you're going to play a dodgy old guy on some planet in the not too distant future.
Yeah, thanks, mate. I was thinking a rebel or a Jedi Knight, but, not a dodgy old git.
I could be a Jedi. Yeah. I mean, one of the things of the Star Wars universe that I think that they keep coming back to, but I think which was quite refreshing in some parts of Rogue One was the Jedi thing was background. It's sort of it wasn't in the forefront. You had the Vader, coming into it more close to the end, but it was quite nice to actually tell the stories when and have the characters when there wasn't the Force involved, when it was
no Force or lightsabers, until the very end. So yeah,
I quite like that.
Yeah.
perhaps the direction is, that it is in the background, and you don't have to follow those. It doesn't have to all be about the Jedi. It doesn't have to be huge, galactic battles all the time, does it? It's just, Clive said, it's a big universe, lots of stories, lots of fun stories.
Absolutely, and it doesn't all, some of it will be serious and some of it will be amusing, and again, there's room for both. So absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I just hope that we see a lot more variety in the stories. Give us something different. Give us like a spy thriller. Tell that story of the Bothams to show how they planned and they risked everything to get those the next Death Star plans. But I don't know if Disney's kind of prepared to take those risks. I mean, they didn't. I mean, yes, they kind of gave us a war film, but they didn't really fully embrace it. It wasn't what I was expecting to see. I was expecting to see, I mean, the advertising that had the Rebel helmet like the Full Metal Jacket helmet. I was like, I'd like to see a film like that. I'd like to see it from the grunts' point of view, down on the ground in this battle, fighting for their lives, and you don't know, it's a live or die situation. Those are the stakes, and that's. I'd like to see that, but the problem is Disney. They want a general audience. They're not going to go for niche, and so we are going to kind of get more of the same stuff, kind of crowd pleasing, kind of spectacle. Going to have big battles,
But you have to say that Disney took a huge risk with Rogue One. Here's loads of new characters that you're going to be introduced to, and then they're all going to die. That's a big call for
yeah.
But you can still buy the figures.
Yeah, but I would say if Disney had, I think it would have been more of a risk if that was the first film that came out. If
definitely,
if Force Awakens wasn't the massive hit it was, you would have found that Rogue One may have got shelved. So
maybe.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, Disney's about those Disney bucks and
Disney dollars.
Yeah.
Well, Disney's an odd company. It's everybody always has, or still has, the impression that Disney is this, from Walt Disney and this animation thing and Buena Vista and these sort of comedies, and but they're involved in a lot of production companies that produced a lot of more adult orientated films.
Oh, yeah, big time.
Ewoks and things like that. So it's I think the difference now is Disney has suddenly become the biggest thing. They bought Marvel. They bought Lucas out of Star Wars. They've
just bought the X-Men Fox stuff, haven't they, and all that as well.
So they're basically, wrapping it all up. Wouldn't be surprised in the next couple of years that they take over DC and there's a, actual decent DC movie made for once.
Well, I mean, one of the things I will say for Disney though is they seem to, they let Marvel Studios do their thing. They let Lucasfilm, Kathy Kennedy and whatever do their thing. They don't, they don't sort of mess with the actual property itself. They own it, but they don't mess with it from what I can see. And those films have been successful, as a result. And the trouble is, everything else seems to want to copy Marvel, which is part of the problem now, I think. But that's a whole nother discussion. Sorry.
But then Disney managed to keep things very, very separate. The actual Marvel films and the style and the structure hasn't impacted on their other franchises, hasn't impacted on their. It's, the Star Wars thing. Basically they gave it to JJ to actually to give it new life. Pretty much gave pretty reign,
and he did give it new life. So yeah.
I mean,
cool.
it's Disney. I don't think are incarnation of all evil quite yet. Give them a few more years, so they may surprise us. They may actually, sign off on some decent, hardcore sci-fi for the Star Wars universe, which could be fabulous.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to wait and see. I mean, what we do know is from here to God knows when, we're going to get a Star Wars film every year.
Yeah,
That's right.
There'll be plenty of it. We'll be sick of it. Who would have thought? Who would have thought?
Yeah, who would have thought you would get sick of decent Marvel films? But game that way. Yeah.
Anyway,
I just wish I was a kid again. Bloody hell, it would be amazing.
Yeah.
So, I think that's a good place to end it.
Indeed.
Clive, where can people find out more about your work?
They can look at some of my more recent films as a filmmaker at Vimeo. They go there and enter my name, Clive Ashenden. They'll find me there.
And Anthony, where can people find out more about your work?
Anthony.
Sorry, Alex. Shit.
Anthony left.
Okay, edit point.
A lot of stuff is still online. It's connected with Keith. But hopefully more in some bookstores.
Okay.
Hopefully soon.
Yes.
Oh, well done. Nice.
And Kenneth, where can we find your work?
You wish
We got Kenneth Branagh on. Wow. If you go to YouTube and put in British Isles, Eyles, as in my last name, you can find films that I made there.
And as always, you can find my work at independentrunnings.com. You can find this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, and all good podcast providers. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Just search Movie Heaven, Movie Hell. And please leave us a rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher. It all helps.
And I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank all of the guests that we've had on, the various filmmaker guests that we've had on in the last year for Movie Heaven, Movie Hell, and to wish our listeners a Merry Christmas, and we will be back with more interesting stuff, hopefully, in 2018.
Yes, we've got some good stuff lined up, and hopefully we might get back to talking about some directors.
You never know. But there'll always be heaven and hell.
That's it. So,
Happy Life Day, everyone. Yub nub.
Yep.